Hey everybody, it's Simone again. We're in our third episode of Living the Body series, sponsored by 64 Doors and Unlock Your Design. Today, we're here with Timothy Brainerd of timothybrainerd.com, who is the genius behind the Body Keys and who has been walking us through our discussion of dietary regimen and PHS. Also with us today is Bella Crystal of The Living Matrix, Unlock Your Design, and 64 Doors. We are so excited that y'all are here with us today. This is a continuation of our second episode where we really started digging into the dietary regimen and PHS. And thank you all for all your feedback and comments. And we love how you are bringing this information to life in your lives. It is so exciting. Timothy, take us through this.
Okay. That's a great introduction too, Simone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. We have, as we have learned, a lot of ground to cover today. We had hoped to make it through all 12 of the digestive types revealed by human design on our last conversation, and we got halfway through. So our goal tonight is to show up and look at those remaining 6 out of 12 digestive processes. Now, before we do this, I thought it might be wise to do a quick rewind, and we'll recap the last conversation briefly. Last time we spoke, we looked at the first 3 colors of the advanced human design chart. So when we're dealing with this idea of color and we're looking at dietary regimen and digestive types, what we're really dealing in is an advanced application of human design known as the primary health system. Okay, so this came up through a number of our viewers after the last call. They wanted help understanding where to look in the chart in order to find this. So I wanted to take a moment to point this out and to describe what some of the differences are and kind of create an additional framework in terms of context for this conversation. So to begin with, there is a distinction between dietary regimen, primary health system, and these colors that we're referring to, okay? The colors come out of the primary health system. It's a human design term. So we looked at colors 1, 2, and 3 last time we spoke. Now, the colors are one piece of a total narrative that contributes to dietary regimen, okay? Just one piece. And this is very important. I think a lot of people get confused about this. We're dealing with a process that contributes to the holistic narrative that is how your body relates to food and information. Dietary regimen is a very complicated, rather complex analysis of your total human design, not just the color, okay? So what we're talking about here is, it's important to understand it's not the whole story. It's fascinating and important, and everyone deserves to understand this information, but it's not the whole story. This is something I should have said at the start of the last conversation. Really, in order to understand how your body works, you need a greater perspective. You need to look at the whole design, and there are aspects underneath of the layer that we're on today that are even more important, arguably, than what we're looking at. So there's a lot here. This is just the tip of an iceberg, but it's an exciting tip of an iceberg, and I don't know that it's one that's been addressed in this way. So as a final additional piece here, for those of you who have access to your advanced charts, I've noticed that a lot of you are using Genetic Matrix as a platform for creating these charts. First of all, I would like to say, good choice. I love Genetic Matrix. To this day, it's still the only platform that I use, and John is a friend of mine at this point. He's someone that I have learned to trust. What he's built in Genetic Matrix is something that I can very, very confidently recommend. So what I'd love to do is I'd love to pull up my own chart as an example. And Bella, if you wouldn't mind doing that right now. Briefly, I'd like to show everyone where it is on that advanced chart that we're looking. This is a bit more technical than we got in our last conversation, and I don't want to dwell on the technical details, but I do want those of you who have a chart that looks like this to know where in the chart you can look, okay? So on the Genetic Matrix chart, what we're referring to as color is actually referred to as determination. And Bella, so what Bella is circling here is, you see a cluster of 3 symbols in the top left-hand side of the chart. This is the part of your human design chart that will reveal your determination. But what's interesting to notice about this, so you follow Bella's cursor to this word determination on the left. You see that my determination is known as consecutive. And for those of you who joined us on the last call, you remember that that's one of the two options on the first color level. You have consecutive and alternative, or alternating rather, on that first color level of the hunter body type. Now, something that's worth noting here again is that determination in and of itself is actually different from color. So if you go back to that cluster of symbols, Bella, and you look at those three symbols, you'll notice that you have a left-facing arrow, you have a yellow circle, and you have a green triangle. That yellow circle is the color, but it's only one of those three contributors to determination. So this is where it starts to get kind of tricky and complicated, and I don't want to muddy the waters. Just understand that color is one piece of something that contributes to determination. Determination is one piece of what contributes to the holistic story that is dietary regimen. That's how this all plays out. It's almost like we're opening up in layers, like those Russian dolls, right? The nesting dolls. So just understand this as an important piece of context for today's conversation. What we're looking at is important, but it's not the whole story. Are we all clear on that?
Great.
Okay. I do apologize for not making that clear last time, but had I done so, we may not have made it through all six.
Yeah, and I want to just say to everybody, this is a conversation, and we're probably going to have something more where we are going to learn about it, more lecture type, but we are coming together in conversation about these things because we're inspired about them. So it's not really a teaching. That's what we are, like, that's what I feel what we're doing here. So that's also why we are inspired by it. We're speaking about it. If it's not a teaching, it's not a lecture.
Great point. There's a different energy to a conversation like we're having today. So it doesn't allow for the depth that you might get from a lecture, but what it does do is it introduces something that I think has been kind of hidden a bit in the human design world, and something that is certainly lacking in the modern world. This stuff is important, so that's why we're talking about it. Now, last week we looked at color 1, color 2, and color 3. And for those of you who didn't join us, color 1 is known as appetite, or the hunter body. Color 2 is known as taste, or the gatherer body. And color 3 is known as thirst, or the transformer body. What we want to do today is we want to look at the remaining 3 layers, color 4, color 5, and color 6. If you recall, every one of these layers has 2 options, what are known as binaries. Okay, so you've got 2 options on every layer, and that's how we get a total of 6 remaining digestive types. It's so funny to talk about this stuff because I feel like sometimes it's like I'm weaving a web. It's pretty complicated if you're not paying close attention. What I will say is that those of you who commented in response to our last conversation did a remarkable job of following along. So I just want to congratulate everyone who really made a point of joining us and getting what we were talking about. And for those of you who missed it, it's available on YouTube, it's available on Facebook. Go back and feel free to study it. But for today, we need to move into color 4. And before I do this, I would like to just check in with Bella and Simone and see if you have anything to add or any questions you'd like to address beforehand.
I would just like to encourage people who are on the live to write in your questions. We do pay attention, as we used the questions last time as part of our, you have a seat at the table with us if you're in the live with us. So please comment and engage with us.
Great. Thank you, Simone. Okay, so moving up into the 4th, 5th, and 6th colors. Immediately when we hit this layer, I wish we had planned it this way. It would have been really smart. But the first 3 and the remaining 3, there's actually a break or a pause between them in terms of how they function, in terms of how they feel. So the bottom 3, if you recall, they all focused on the food to some great degree. The first layer could only take in one single ingredient at a time. The second layer was very selective, very picky about what it takes in. And the third layer was very focused on the temperature of the food. So there's a pretty direct focus on the food and which foods do or don't work based on these parameters. But when we look at the 4th, 5th, and 6th layers, the conversation expands a bit beyond the food. Now, in order to understand how these digestive types and these digestive processes work, we actually have to look to the world outside of the physical body itself, which is truly remarkable to consider that the quality of your environment has such a direct and immediate effect on your body's ability to metabolize food. This is one of those things where I wish I could just pause and be like, Get it? Like do you get it? That's crazy to consider. What we're dealing with here, as we mentioned last time, is energy. We're dealing with energetic relationship. And now the 4th, 5th, and 6th layers are focusing on the quality of the world around you. This literally means that the quality of your environment either stimulates your digestive process, your metabolism, or restrains it in some way. This is really something to consider, and it's something that is, I think, primarily goes unaddressed in the question of eating and holistic health, so it's something new. Color 4. Color 4 is the first layer, the first step that we take in this evolutionary movement up towards the 6th. Remember, each of these is becoming more and more subtle in the way that it interacts with food and information. And this 4th level is known as touch. This is literally the first time that your digestive process reaches out and touches the world outside of you and even the world beyond food. It's known as touch. And the body type is known as the determiner. It's the only body type that's kind of tricky to describe, and I think it might be too technical for today's conversation to explain why it's called the determiner. But I want you to know the term because it may show up on your chart. You'll want to understand what's happening there. Color 4 is a touch type, and it's the determiner body. What we can learn about it, we can learn from either end of its spectrum. It has 2 sides, okay? And these sides are known as nervous and calm. Nervous and calm. So this particular digestive type is very, very attuned to the quality of the environment that it finds itself situated in while eating. For some types, the calm types, they need the world outside of them to feel calm. This doesn't necessarily mean that they themselves need to feel calm inside, but the world outside of them needs to be quieter and calmer. They're not engaging in big conversations, the like stereotypical family dinner where a lot is happening and there's a lot of noise and laughter, and this will really just turn that person inside out. It won't work for them. They won't be able to digest their food because their digestive process requires the low tone of a calmer environment in order to effectively metabolize food. When that energy is too high pitched, it scrambles their system and their body is not able to understand the nourishment that it's taking in. And so just like that first level can't understand blended foods and it just flushes them, this same process applies here, in that if the space around is not calm enough, then there's too much stimulation in the digestive process energetically, and it just flushes it. It says, I don't know. It literally just says, I can't do this. And on the other side, the nervous side, you have someone who's actually built to benefit from that nervous energy, the stimulating energy. And that's truly remarkable to consider, isn't it? First of all, how completely opposed these types are from one another. And then how something as seemingly ordinary as whether or not someone is talking near you, or whether the TV is on, or whether there's a lot of noise in the space, all of this matters. All of it matters in terms of how this person's body relates to food and information. It's really something, isn't it?
Well, it is, especially if you think about, like, oh, you ask a friend to go out to dinner with you and the friend never wants to go and they prefer to eat. They just go, no, I don't want to. I don't really like to eat out. And you think to yourself, why don't you like to eat out? It's the best thing in the world, because you might be a nervous person who thrives on the stimulation of going out to dinner. And the other person might be the person who just needs calm. Or you might have a friend who says, well, I'll go with you, but I don't want to go to that restaurant. It's too loud. I'll go to this restaurant with you where it's really, where the lighting is low, it's calm, it's quiet, it's more intimate. So, and then, but when we think about the context of digestion as a whole, there's some people who want their offices very quiet and they don't want anybody talking. And there are other people who thrive in an office where there's people and swirling and,
That's right.
All kinds of energy flowing around.
Yes.
And other people can't work in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps us really think about that.
And I also want to point out, or go back to what you were speaking about in the beginning, and that is that the color is only one side. So if you know your color, but not your binary, it's like, that's the same thing for the third color. It's that if you know your color 4, but you don't know if the environment is supposed to be calm or nervous, then it doesn't matter what color you have because you still can't go right. And the same thing for the third color. If you know the temperature is important, but you don't know if you're cold or warm. So that's by the whole picture, like the weaving of it. That's what gives us the whole picture. So it has to be seen together. And we were first thinking we were going to do only the colors, but I'm so happy that we took it slower, and we didn't go in really so much for the hunter body, but for the color 2 and 3, we really went into the binary more, and that's where you're going to understand the magic and the setup that you need, whether it's to put ice in your coffee or it is to have voice canceling earphones when you eat.
Yes. See, and what's so exciting about this is the way that it individualizes this whole course of inquiry. There is no set answer. We mentioned this last time, but it's the sort of thing that you're going to hear me saying over and over again till I'm blue in the face. There's no one answer for everyone. And this is the true value to me of human design as a total system. Everything about human design is focused on you, how you work, and why it is, specifically why it is that you're different, and why that matters, and why it's beautiful too. Yes, it shows us where your areas of potential pitfall may be. Yes, it shows us the ways that you might come completely out of alignment with what's appropriate for you. But in seeing these things, we find ourselves capable of realigning, of coming into a conscious engagement with our lives that slowly but surely brings us back into alignment with what's natural and appropriate and right for us. So this eating thing, it really isn't just about eating. And what you just said about setting up the space, it's so important. This isn't just about eating. It's not about putting the food in your mouth. You begin to get a sense that the question of eating expands beyond consumption. In fact, what you'll learn, and we won't go too far into this today, but you'll learn that eating begins at selection. What am I going to eat? It begins with the question of, am I actually hungry, or is this emotional? And then it moves into selection. What am I going to eat? And from there it moves into preparation. And from there it moves into consumption. And only at that point do you begin to actually digest the food in the body. But all along the way leading up to that, your body energetically is relating to space, food. By the time you take in the food, there's been this almost like ritual crescendo that allows for the food to take on so much more meaning. That's a part of why our bodies are able to make use of it in a different way when we have this understanding, because we're engaging not only with the food, but with our lives in a whole new way.
Beautiful. So you were saying that maybe not go into why it's called the determiner, but I'm feeling maybe we could give a little bit more information about why it's called touch, because touch and environment, how do we understand what the connection is?
It's a tricky one. This is one of those where when I first met the information, I was scratching my head, why is this one called touch? And this continues to this day, by the way. There are certain keynotes in human design that to me feel like maybe they were rushed or something. But I never like to go straight to that. So I've spent a lot of time contemplating this. And I think what I have come to on this particular level is what I described at the outset of introducing it, which is simply that on this level, for the first time, we're reaching beyond this direct focus on the food, which is almost like a tunnel vision. And we're opening the perspective to an awareness that focuses beyond the food, beyond the body, and looks to the world outside of us. There's, something else that happens with this color 4 thematically is a connection to the breath. And so it's like this sharing of space and air and awareness and energy with something greater than yourself and your plate. Another thing that I think is happening here with this theme of touch is there's actually a benefit. Again, this is going into a lot of the additional information around this, but there's a benefit to preparation. Once you hit this 4th layer, 5th layer, and 6th layer, it's really, really ideal for you to be preparing your own food. On this 4th level, it's specifically helpful for you to touch your food. In fact, a lot of people on this level benefit from eating their food with their hands. And so this makes sense when you're eating maybe a cheeseburger or Ethiopian food, and maybe it makes less sense if you have a bowl of soup. So, but understand that there's a tactile engagement that plays out here that is different from any of the layers that preceded it. The touch is both literal and, I believe, somewhat more metaphorical in its value.
Yeah, I love that you brought in again the line structure, basically, because the fourth line is about, kind of touching the other with the heart, or being touched by the heart, and that's like the breath, the fourth chakra. So it makes sense with the line structure that would be, and also it is, if it's the heart, touch, it feels that you can think about the 4-line personality and be like, of course, touch, and that's even romantic, knowing how the fourth line is. So yeah, I like that.
The fourth line, the fourth color, and the fourth tone. Tone is a level underneath color that we don't have time to get to in this conversation, but they all carry this theme of meditation, not Om meditation, but a mindfulness, an awareness of what's happening, a close contact to the moment. There's something very slow about it. Even with nervousness, think about the nervous side. This person is actually in touch with the stimulation of that energy in their environment. It's not a pace, it's an awareness. So that nervousness isn't about speeding up. It's about sensing this stimulation. And you're doing that, of course, consciously as you learn about this information, but ultimately your body has been doing that all along. So the difference for this person between a coffee shop, like let's say I'm in Ohio where my family lives, and I go to a coffee shop, it's likely to be pretty empty and quiet, like it's a quieter place in the world. And so I might have plenty of space, and it might feel wonderful and calm for me to be there. But I can tell you, when I lived in San Francisco, that you'd be hard pressed to find a coffee shop like that, because they're always packed, they're always noisy, everyone's working. So these qualities matter, and feeling into that matters. And for those of you who are still scratching your head over determiner, I can tell you this: it has to do with actively choosing and like designing the right environment. So you're determining the quality of that space. I really want to go deeper into this, but I don't want to take away from our other remaining levels. So you tell me, do you want me to explain in more detail what that means, or?
What do you feel, Simone? I mean,
No,
I always want more.
What you just said was so succinct. It's, about the active determination of where you're going to eat and how you're going to eat. And so that helped me, kind of, for the purpose of a conversation, that kind of set it for me. I feel like I could call my best friend, and say, oh, I learned about 4 today. It's a determiner, and here's what that means. And in fact, I think my friend I would call is a determiner.
Wow.
And there's something with the wording too, where I feel like nervous, like you said, sometimes it feels like they were named too fast. There's like an intensity. Is there an intensity that makes your heart feel good, or is it calmness that makes your heart feel good? Well, yeah. that's the setting that you're creating in order to be able to digest.
Yes.
It's interesting on that, because when you say the word nervous, I see the waveform.
Mm-hmm.
And when you say the word calm, I see the waveform.
Real long and low and easy. Versus...
Yep. So those for me have, I actually see the energy of them as you say the word. So, yeah.
Good. Okay. I think I can offer a very quick example. Bella, I heard you when you kind of like feel like, give us a little bit more. So I can use that family setting example. Okay. So you're sitting at the table with the family and you're nervous, and everyone's kind of quiet. Maybe it's been a hard day. Maybe that's just the nature of your family. No one talks. They just eat their food and get going. If you're a determiner and you're nervous in this setting, it's actually appropriate for you to kind of like goose the system a little bit, get people talking to determine the quality of that energy. Mm-hmm. You would be the sort of person who would initiate conversation, or maybe like your sibling is on the other side of the table and you like start joking with them or throwing food at them. I don't know. You get it going, right? And then if you're on the other side and it's noisy, it's actually appropriate for you to say, hey, look, I kind of need everyone to take it down a notch because it's really bugging me. This is what's meant by the determiner. And it's the only one of all 6 levels where this is appropriate. Everyone else is they want to actively select the appropriate place ahead of time. This level is the one that gets to kind of smack people upside the head and be like, hey, this isn't working for me.
I mean, I love this because of the line structure. the fourth line is there to convince, and it's fixed in what it thinks. So of course it's going to convince other people and determine, like, we're going to have it slower. We're going to have it more intense. It's
right.
Perfect. That's the fourth line. Its truth has to come across. Otherwise, it's not happy. It's transpersonal, the first transpersonal line, and it's kind of not refined in that process. It's just kind of blunt, the first line of the second trigram. It makes so much sense.
That's so good. So there you go.
I love the empowerment of that, because if you know you're a 4 and you do that, imagine then, like you might irritate some people, because you shake things up if you need it nervous, or you say, hey, let's eat it, you don't talk, but imagine, a whole different scenario. You're sitting down to dinner with your family, or with, going out to dinner with your friends, and you go, I can't help myself because I'm a line 4. I'm going to shake things up. I find it empowering to know that, and to just be able to.
But there's something with the fourth line. The third line, I think, would shake things up more in some way. The fourth line is like, it's their truth. Like I don't think a fourth line would even, like, there's something
they wouldn't
think
say
about you as the fourth line, Simone. We wouldn't do it to shake things up. We would do it because we really believe that's our truth and that everybody's going to benefit from it. And we're a little bit fixed. We wouldn't wrap our head around it. Maybe somebody else is nervous around the table and need it another way. That's a little bit of, that's that fixedness of the fourth line that is standing on the first line empowerment, that doesn't really, like, it wants to come across with its truth, but it's not super good to put itself in the clothes of another. So there's something interesting there.
Well, as a projector, though, I'm feeling it all anyways. Like, okay, he wants us to shut up. She wants us to talk.
Oh, man.
I get the whole thing.
It can get really tricky in a family setting too. Yeah. There's a reason that the first book course that was ever delivered on this subject as like a relatively legitimate introduction to it was known as Radical Transformations. The founder of human design often referred to any application of any part of human design as a radical thing. And the reason is that in order to really experiment with what we're describing here, once you've learned about your total dietary regimen, there actually is going to be a process, a period of time during which you probably will be better served through kind of self-focusing around eating. So maybe you don't eat with the people that you're used to eating for a period of time, so that you can understand truly how your body responds when you have complete control over what's happening here. That isn't to say that you spend the rest of your life eating in a cave because, hey, that's the only way to control the variables. It's really just a matter of being, I suppose, radical enough about understanding yourself that you set that time aside to understand how you work. And from there, your body will show you exactly what it needs in order for you to honor it in a sustainable way. So
true story, because I'm a cold, right? And so I'm also Cajun. So I've been putting, red pepper on all my foods since birth. And I after we had the call last week, I did some research on foods that cool the digestive system. And I talked to my partner about it. I was like, I know we put Tony Southtree seasoning on everything, and I'm gonna have to stop that because my digestive system, I need to bring cool foods to it. And so we already brainstormed a whole list of, when we're eating together, what that might look like. And so it was so empowering to have that conversation with him, and for him to get it, and to see it's a radical shift in thinking about food, for me.
It is. And it requires two things. One, personal responsibility. You have to own this. If it's going to work for you, you have to own it. You have to try it on for size. You have to experiment like a true scientist. Mm-hmm. And you got to get creative. I mean, this stuff, it takes you so far beyond the cut and dry, straightforward, easy to apply. Just don't eat meat. We're not there anymore. It's a whole new territory, and there are a lot of additional factors to consider, and you have to get creative, especially when it comes to eating with others. Mm-hmm. And that is nowhere more true than on this fourth level. I mean, this is like the trickiest one in that regard when it comes to relational eating. If you're calm, you're going to have to spend some time eating completely alone in order to understand truly what your body is needing. Mm-hmm. And Ra, the founder of human design, he was calm. and his son was nervous. So he often talked about this, about how he would start at the table and he'd just be like, forget it, and he'd go eat in his office. You know, they each needed different things, and so they found ways around that.
And I find that so empowering, because if you know what you are and you can express that to others, and it's not a personal, they don't take it personally, you know, and then they can be your teammate. Oh, I know you need quiet.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, I'm going to go in the den and eat with the TV on because I need nervous. You stay in here in the kitchen or the dining room, and we'll shut the door so you can eat in quiet. And then it's like, you know, we understand each other, as opposed to taking the other person's determination as a personal attack, which it's not, you know. So empowering.
So I have one thing before we move on that has to do with all the 3 types in the upper trigram of the hexagon structure. So now we're speaking about the environment. We're going to go into speak to even more subtle, you know, levels. So I would like to mention something about the selection of food. Would it mean that it's much less important here, or is there still something with that process of like, can you eat anything, or what is the way of selecting your food when you have these more subtle colors and tones?
The same significance applies, but it comes from different parts of the chart. So your food selection process will be determined by your type. It will be determined by your inner authority, and it will be determined by certain gates that are activated in your profile. It will also be determined by, more than anything, in fact, by the tone, which is what's happening underneath of this. And the tone is something that within Dietary Regimen I refer to as a superpower sensor. It's a way of engaging with food and environment on a sensory level that allows you to gain insight as to what is right or wrong for you. In fact, the superpower sensor, that tonal level, is exactly what fuels the inner authority. So like when you learn about your dietary regimen after having experimented for some time on the surface, so to speak, with your type, strategy, and authority, what you find is your unique way of physically engaging with the world in such a way that all the information you need to know comes directly into the exact place that you need it to in order for your mind to get it and give you that inner response that you're seeking. So exciting. In fact, anytime that I do a dietary regimen, anytime that we have this analysis and work face-to-face like this for an hour and a half or 2 hours, this is the area that I'm aiming for. Right on past color, color is just a frame. It's like a box that everything else works inside of. But ultimately understanding that your superpower sensor and how you can apply this is what illuminates the whole experiment from the very beginning. Tone is what allows you to apply your inner authority directly, consciously, and physically like a full human. It's very exciting stuff. Yeah, you get that, right? It's like, oh man.
We're gonna have to make a masterclass on that. Let's do that. I can't wait.
Yeah, I know. I feel horrible getting so excited about it because it's like, and we don't have time to get there. So purchase your dietary regimen today. That's not what this is about. I'm just excited about these things. So we'll get there. Okay. Do we feel ready to move on to the 5?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know which one of you has access to the live comments. I'm not watching them because it totally distracts me.
Yeah. No, I have them here. Everything is under control.
If anything comes up, please feel free to jump right in with questions. Fifth layer. Fifth layer is a fun one. This is sound. Color 5 is about sound, and it's known as the listener body, the listener. So here we are. We've moved through all these layers from very, very dense and kind of primitive at the bottom to more subtle in the 4 to 5. Now we're dealing with the acoustic frequency band. Your body, its ability to metabolize food will be determined by the quality of its acoustic environment, not just how much is happening in the world around it, which is one type of energy, but now we're dealing with the quality of the soundscape of your environment. Amazing. Amazing to consider that something as subtle as a sound wave will affect your digestive process if you are exhibiting this color 5 in your chart. So, sound. 2 sides of this. The 2 sides are known as high and low. This is such a mystical one to me because we actually don't know. I say we, like within the primary health system, there's no direct statement as to whether what we're dealing with here is high volume sound versus low volume sound, or high frequency sound versus low frequency sound. So there's something about this level that just really requires that same like extra layer of self responsibility, where you go out and you find out what it is for you. On the high side, we're maybe dealing with high volume, and there are experiments around this. Maybe you need like a good high amount of music or sound in the room in order for your body to get the stimulation that it needs to digest food. Maybe it means that you need high frequency sound, and so you're listening to something that's maybe a bit more orchestral. If we're looking at music as an example, something that's brighter with violins and a lot of that like higher frequency sound, versus the other side, which maybe prefers something more meditative, like you would hear in a yoga center, where you got these like low undertones that you can kind of ride. We don't know exactly what the difference is here. You have to go and find it out for yourself if you're a color 5. If you're on the high side, I would recommend playing with volume first. I think this is the most likely one to give you like a quick hit of whether or not it's useful for you. It'll be interesting. Keep in mind too that though I'm using music as an example of sound, we're dealing with the whole frequency band, the whole acoustic frequency band. So it could be again, you're in San Francisco in the middle of a coffee shop and there's not necessarily music on, or maybe there's music on top of barista sounds and people talking and a guy on the phone next to you and all this noise. Noise is sound too, and it may or may not be great for you. You may be high sound but hate that kind of noise, right? It might be a lot of noise, but your body might just be like, oh, get me out of here. And there are actually many things in the chart that can contribute to this one way or another. Again, why you need a holistic analysis, not just this one thing. And if you're on the low side, you play with maybe putting in earplugs. It's a really fun and quick and easy way if you're on the low side to test this. Eat with earplugs in and see how you feel. But don't just eat. Select, prepare, and consume with earplugs in. See what happens. You know, that's the beginning. And then as you figure out what's happening there, keep the energy low, keep the volume low, and then play different types of music and see how they feel. But in every case, what's happening is a dialogue with your own body. And that's why this is exciting. That's why this is beneficial. In order to apply any of this, you must practice what I refer to as body listening. This new way of turning your mental attention towards the body, not as a commander, not in order to impose the right way of eating, but as a student to say, what works? Talk to me, body. What works? Right? It's a very different thing. Very different energy about it too. It's respectful. Right? So 5. This 5th layer is also very, very sensitive. So as we become more and more subtle in terms of how the body functions, we're also developing a sensitivity. That sensitivity is a gift. And without awareness, that sensitivity can be so uncomfortable. I almost said a curse. Sometimes it can feel that way. But it's never a curse. It's just that we haven't yet understood how something works. And so on this 5th level, don't be concerned if you do feel very sensitive to the quality of the sound around you. If someone's talking at the table next to you and they're getting noisy and you feel something inside you kind of clutch, like, that means something. It really does. And you're allowed to honor that. Unlike the 4, though, it wouldn't necessarily be ideal for you to swat that guy upside the head. It would be ideal for you to recognize what your body needs and find a setting that serves that. So we've moved out of that determiner space. Be aware that this requires a little bit of foresight. 5th and the 6th in particular, they will require planning. They will require time and experimentation. And there is no way for me or anyone in the world to say, this is what you must do. All we can do is point you in a direction, which is exciting, but it also, it can be intimidating too.
But, again, so empowering to know. And then, like you said, to select, go through your experimentation process, play with it, try it out. And then when you're in the position that you have to select something, to be able to express, I prefer this over that because of this, people can take that in and they go, oh, that makes sense.
Yes.
And if it's not something that, if they're not the opposite of you, then it's something that, oh, you can work around,
Yes.
So it's really so empowering.
I believe so. Yes. Now, looking at the time, we're already somehow down to like less than 15 minutes till the hour is up. And so I wonder if we want to just jump right into the 6, look at that, and then wrap back around for questions. How would you feel about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. So let's look at the 6th and final level of this story, color 6. Color 6 is about light. Of course it is. Remember, we're dealing with refinement of frequencies. We're becoming finer and finer and finer in terms of this frequency engagement or energetic engagement with the world. And it makes sense that after sound waves would come light waves. Okay? This is about light. It's known as the watcher body. So if on that 5th level, your whole body was like an ear, on the 6th level, your whole body is like an eye. And it's relating to the quality of the light space around it, the light environment. You have 2 sides to this story, just like every other one that we've looked at so far. And these are known as direct on the one side and indirect on the other side. I get excited about every level. I find myself wanting to say, oh, and this is the most interesting one. They're all the most interesting ones. But this one is so fun. We're dealing with your body's access to light, specifically sunlight, but also artificial light. Okay, we know that this relates directly to sunlight. That's where the primary focus is. But we also know that there will be that any light band is going to affect you. There is going to be something there. So on the direct side, your body is built to soak up the sun. It's ideal for you to eat, to think, to hold conversations, to engage in your life in the light, literally. And in this case, you actually want that light to be on your skin. So on the 6th level, there's always a connection to the skin, very much like on that 4th level of touch, except here we're dealing with an even more sensitive skin contact, okay? And so it's ideal for light to touch your skin. It's very good for you to eat during the day. It is not ideal for you to sleep on your food. So you eat during those daylight hours, you get all of the digestion and metabolism done during those hours, and that light frequency direct on your skin is exactly what stimulates your metabolism in order to do this, okay? Indirect is exactly what it sounds like, indirect light source. You do not want to be in the sun while you're eating. In fact, on this side, many times these people are referred to as nocturnals. Ooh. That word always reminds me of vampires for some reason. It's kind of creepy, but I love it. Nocturnals. It's actually ideal for you to eat between the hours of sunset and sunrise, those nighttime hours. These are the people who are pretty well cut out for intermittent fasting, by the way. You spend the better portion of your waking hours not eating. Interesting, right? Mm-hmm. When I studied this, I remember reading a lot of examples of people who were this type and had already organized their whole life around this intuitively. Maybe they worked second shift, like they had already organized their lives in a way that made sense here. That said, in my experience of hosting these dietary regimens, I have yet to find someone with this type who has naturally attuned to it. So for those of you who have indirect, don't feel bad if you're not sleeping during the day and awake at night. It's actually, in my experience, more common that there has been no awareness about this, and that learning about it will be a complete mind blower. Mm-hmm. And remember, there's a lot of other things that contribute to this, but on this very general level, if you're direct, you want that direct contact with light. If you're indirect, you do not want that direct contact with sunlight, nor do you want to be eating under an artificial light. You want space between you and those light bands. Mm-hmm. Your body needs it. If it's too much light, you're overstimulated. You can't effectively or optimally digest your food.
I mean, I'm from Sweden, so I'm thinking about bears and birds. Why? Because we have dark in the winter, 20 hours a day or more, or even in the north of Sweden, there is no daylight. And then in the summer, so either it would be like a bird. In the winter, you just eat and eat and eat and eat because there's never direct sunlight. But then in the summer, you would be like the bird, you just fly and don't eat. Or, it's like, it's funny, right? Well, how maybe these kind of people are not supposed to live at the North Pole and the South. Like maybe they are supposed to live at the equator where day and night are more or less the same. Because otherwise it would look very different in the winter from in the summer. And as a sixth line and having a sensitivity, I don't feel like it would be that complete, just like throwing everything around if it's summer solstice or winter solstice.
Yeah, right. I would agree. What you said, the word sensitive, you said sixth line sensitive. You can just put those together. Anytime you see the number 6 in your human design chart, it equals a special sensitivity. There's something here in that 6th level that's always reaching beyond anything we've looked at leading up to that point. And that does play out in sensitivity too. Your body will be more sensitive. Anytime that I see someone whose determination, where their dietary regimen is kind of played out on this 6th line theme, whether it's in color or tone, I know this is a person who will powerfully benefit from this information because their body is so sensitive that they are desperately going to need to know exactly how to nourish it. Oftentimes on this level, you'll find people who have issues with their skin. They don't understand what their body needs, and the misalignment of that misunderstanding will present itself on the skin. So if you're a 6th color or a 6th tone, and you've always struggled with skin blemishes and even, I would say, fairly severe skin issues, that's simply because you haven't understood what your body needs. And there's something about dietary regimen that absolutely will serve your process. I'm not saying that overnight your skin will clear, but I am saying that you will note the differences in your skin. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, so do we have any questions?
Well, Timothy, if somebody wanted to do a dietary regimen session with you, what would they need to do? How would they set that up with you?
2 ways we can go about this. For those of you watching, you're on Facebook, and you're welcome to reach out to me directly by private message anytime you like, okay? The technically appropriate way would be to visit timothybrainerd.com, click on Dietary Regimen, and then follow through to the complete analysis. When you go to purchase the complete analysis, form will pop up, and it's going to require certain information. This is an important thing to note, and I'm glad you asked about this, Simone. In order to operate on this level of your human design, an exact time of birth is a prerequisite. You've got to know when you were born to the minute, because on this level, things change quickly. At the very minimum, they change every 15 minutes. And if you're on any cusp of this, it could go one way or another. And think about someone who is right on the cusp between cold and hot. If you don't know the minute you were born, you could be in the complete opposite direction of what's correct for you. All right, so just be aware that if you're interested in this, it's worth the extra effort to get your exact time of birth. I know for myself, I had to go through this whole process. I so wanted to know what my dietary regimen was, and it was weeks and weeks of waiting for my birth certificate to come. My mom had told me my birth time, but I needed to know, and so I waited, and it stunk. But ultimately, having that confidence that what I'm dealing with is exact changes everything, and it allows you to really lean into your experiment. So you'll see on my website that this is the one thing that I state as like an absolute must. You got to have that exact time.
Nice.
And I also want to mention something, because now we are really looking at far out in the decimals of your design on the minutes of when you were born, because mostly there's only the moon, which is moving fast at changing your normal design. So I would also say some people, like, there's, I would say, thread from the outside in and start to know your SNA, what we say in human design, your strategy and authority. And then there is so much, but it's almost like sometimes I see people diving into this before they even have a little bit of sense of like what kind of animal, like I said, what kind of aura do you have? What kind of inner authority do you have? So I would also say this requires a basic understanding of your design. if you start with the details and you don't have like the big picture, I'm a 6-line, right? You can hear that. Then it's I would say it's a little bit of a waste. So learn about yourself from like the big keynotes into the detailed keynotes, and then you have this super detailed picture that is just amazing. So that's I think that's an important distinction to make, that this is something that it's a superpower, like you were saying, Timothy, but that superpower is kind of opened as the last petals in the flower when all the other petals have opened already.
Bella, some people will go through that by themselves, but there are other people who would love a guide. So if you're interested in going into your human design to get that basic, and you don't like to do it by yourself, how could people contact you to do that?
I mean, I feel like what we are standing for, all three of us, is that we are catering to the differentiated individual. So that the things that we are doing is that we are having those conversations that are completely open, and then we are thinking about creating master classes of these things behind. And then people want to work one-to-one, then they have the really an expertise. 1.5 hour session with Tim. And then there are these things that you and I and Ashley, we're doing lives with people that want to share with the world about, who they are. And then we have the inner circle, where you have a small group, and it's more about self-leadership. So you come in and you do it in a group. And tomorrow, for example, Tim is coming into the inner circle, and he's going to answer questions. So that's going to be a more direct, like 10 people maybe that are on the call that are going to be able to have that personal, but it's still a community. And then the conversation continues between everybody stepping up to self-leadership. So I feel like what we are standing for is that we are catering to the individuation. So we are asking you out there, take responsibility. What is your perfect setup? That's the same thing. How can you digest what we are doing? Are you digesting it in this kind of conversation? Are you like very selective? There's like all these things. How would you take in this in the best way so that it stays with you and can be embodied? That would be my question for everybody watching,
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, that was an important point.
So if you're enjoying this Living the Body series, please come back and meet with us next Friday. Tim, why don't you give us an overview of what we're going to do next Friday?
Next Friday is going to be a fun one. So next Friday, we are going to read Simone's Dietary Regimen. And I say we because what we're going to do is Bella and I are going to work together to kind of weave together a whole narrative around what this might look like for Simone. And I'm going to bring all of the expertise that I have on all the layers that we weren't able to touch today. And we're going to deliver that as an example through Simone's body graph. And Bella is going to take all of her expertise of this kind of almost eagle-eye view of the holistic story of Simone's design and bring it right into this specialized conversation that I'll be focusing in. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to, well, first, it's going to be super interesting. And second, I think it's going to deliver to Simone something she can use to proactively transform her own life from the inside out. Mm-hmm. And I think that for those of you watching, I think it will help you to understand truly what is meant when we talk about a complete analysis or a holistic narrative. These aren't cute terms that we throw around to like charge you a lot of money when it comes to our services. It's a real thing. There's a lot happening here, and understanding how it all comes together to create something truly unprecedented in all of time, something precise that is, in this case, only Simone, no one else. It's beautiful. It's going to be very exciting.
So exciting. Bella, would you like to, are there any closing comments that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I just feel that kind of work, when you look at all the aspects and you weave them, that is the permission slip to be yourself in the world. That's what it feels like. And even if people won't be a projector 4/6 with a color 3, it really shows you how it feels to get that blueprint and recognize it in yourself, and to kind of take the power back and start to walk as who you are in the world, and having some of the help, because there are going to be epiphanies. And once they are there, your awareness starts taking you on that journey that we still call the experiment, because it's only you who can embody that and really tell us and show us how it looks like, as you being an example, a role model. So I feel like that's what the process is going to show. And it's also going to give people a feeling of what it would be to have a reading with Timothy, and why it's also important to not forget that you're an emotional being. Some of those gates that are giving us, some of these tips where to look. So it's really, I love, because it's a real life example. So
Yes.
I'm super excited.
Timothy, any last words before we sign off?
Just thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been so patient with us as we talk about these things and who's expressed interest. Obviously, we care a great deal about the sort of information that we're sharing with you. And it's super exciting to notice that there are other, crazy people out there too. So this has been fun, and I feel very grateful for the container, for the opportunity to meet with everyone in this way.
Well, thank you everybody for joining this third episode in the Living the Body series, sponsored by 64 Doors and Unlock Your Design. And we hope you'll join us next Friday when we continue this topic. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.